course, I will never be able to forget what happened to me. The scars on my body and the memories I have are something I will never be rid of.
The suburbs of London. Eileen Sheedy wakes up to a late-night phone call.
Mum, I've been moved. I'm lying on our street.
It was her 18-year-old daughter Kate Sheedy, who was on her way home from a party when a stranger's car deliberately ran her over twice. Bleeding, the girl managed to call her mother and get the best of herself. "I'm in so much pain."
He did it on purpose. Exactly on purpose. He's a scumbag.
Between 2003 and 2004, a series of attacks on young women occurred in quiet areas of London. The common denominator between the cases was random victims, the late hour after a bus ride, and the incredible cruelty of the attacker. The method of the maniac is a sudden blow to the head with a heavy object or a car being driven backwards to finish off the injured victim. A serial killer has started in London, stalking girls near bus stops. No one wrote threats, left any notes, or touched the body. These were not sexually motivated murders, just a blow to the head and a run over. These do not look like murders by a psychopath who hears voices in his head. This is how someone who is used to having power acts. There is a type of man who keeps women afraid at home. Control, abuse, jealousy, constant aggression. But sometimes this becomes not enough for them, and they go out into the street in search of new victims. February 4, 2003, 19-year-old Marsha McDonnell was returning home from a movie. Marsha got off a bus near her home in Hampton. She didn't notice a car slowly rolling down the empty street. As she passed the car, a man got out and started chasing her. He crept up behind her and hit her repeatedly in the head with a heavy, blunt object. It was probably a hammer. Just a few yards from her home, Marsha McDonnell lay bleeding from a fractured skull until neighbors saw her. Despite her serious injuries, she was still alive. 2 days later, she died in hospital without regaining consciousness. No motive, no witnesses, no suspects. Marsha was murdered almost on her doorstep for no reason. Such crimes in Hampton are rare. The police assumed that it was a robbery, and the funny thing is that nothing was stolen from her. Then they decided that this was a tragic, isolated incident, but they were wrong. This was just one of a series of murders committed by a scumbag who killed women out of hatred for them. The silence lasted almost a year and 4 months when the unknown attacked again. May 28, 2004, West London, Yolworth District. 18-year-old Kate Sheedy was celebrating her last day of school. Kate was the head of her senior class and was organising a farewell party for her classmates. After midnight, Kate was walking home alone from the bus stop, which is a 2-minute walk from her house. Like Marsha, Kate was walking home along a quiet, empty street. As she rummaged in her handbag for her keys, she noticed a white minivan parked at the curb with tinted windows and a broken wing mirror. The car was parked with its headlights off, but the engine was running, as if the driver was waiting for someone. Kate knew that something was definitely wrong. The girl sensed danger and, just in case, decided to come to the other side of the road to avoid passing the car. Just as she was about to cross the road, a minivan sped off and crashed into her. Kate ran, but she didn't have time. The car hit her and ran her over. The white minivan stopped and started reversing and ran over her body again, then sped away from the scene. He left his victim dying in the middle of the road, but Kate didn't die. She came to her senses and even, as I said at the beginning of this video, managed to call her mother and call an ambulance.
I was determined to get home at any cost. It didn't take me long to realize that I had been run over twice. I crawled until I lost consciousness. Even then, I realized that I had suffered very serious injuries.
The impact crushed her liver, punctured her lungs, and tore her lower back. Despite her severe injuries, doctors managed to save Kate. She spent several weeks in intensive care and almost a year recovering. Yes, she became the only girl who managed to survive after meeting with a random driver, a killer. Kate herself did not understand why such an inhuman attempt was made on her.
I just asked myself, why? Why would anyone be capable of such a thing?
Let me remind you, at that time, there was no understanding that this was a serial killer. So they were looking for a person with a motive to kill Kate directly. There was no motive, no logic, no explanation at all. Let me remind you, at that time, there was no understanding that this was a serial killer. So they were looking for a person with a motive for killing Kate directly. 3 months had passed since that attack. On August 19, 2004, a 22-year-old French woman, Amélie Delagrange, was murdered in Twickenham, again in West London. Amélie was meeting friends that evening and was returning home at about 10 p.m. The girl dozed off on the bus and missed her stop. When she woke up, she got off the bus at an unfamiliar stop near the park, or rather the cricket field, and walked, cutting the route through the dart park. There she met a man who offered to give her a lift. Amélie did not make contact. The man allegedly grabbed a hammer and hit her on the head with all his might. When the girl fell, the killer continued to inflict blow after blow, after which he left her to die on that deserted spot in the grass. An hour later, a passerby accidentally came across Amélie's bloodied body. Unfortunately, she died on the way to the hospital. This third murder had already caused a stir. If after the attack on Marsha, the police were not yet sure that a serial killer was walking around somewhere nearby, then the massacre of Amélie became an alarm bell. 3 brutal attacks in a year and a half within a radius of several kilometers could no longer be a coincidence. Detectives noticed a common pattern: brutal attacks on young blondes near bus routes in southwest London. Even then, the unknown was called the bus stop killer in the media. The authorities warned residents. It seems that an unknown man has appeared in the Twickenham area, hunting young women. Panic was growing. Until the serial killer is caught, anyone can become the next victim. There were more patrols on the streets. The news started talking about an elusive stalker. The police were actively, around the clock, looking for clues, and soon one did appear. Unraveling a series of attacks became a difficult task for detectives. Inspector Colin Sutton took charge of the investigation, and the operations were codenamed Joddies. There was a lack of direct evidence at the crime scenes. The attacker acted quickly, left no DNA or fingerprints, and disappeared after each episode. He attacked at night. When there were no witnesses, he acted as carefully as possible. However, he did not take into account the CCTV cameras. After Amélie's death, the police, led by Detective Colin, focused on reviewing CCTV footage from the crime scene. The officers studied more than 2,000 hours of footage from street cameras, shops and buses, and carefully reviewed everything, not knowing exactly what they were looking for. And then something interesting finally appeared in the footage. Near Twickenham, a white Ford courier van was spotted parked not far from the scene of Amélie's attack, stood there for a few minutes, and then abruptly pulled away. It was the only clue, and the police seized on it. Unfortunately, finding such a van among the tens of thousands of similar cars turned out to be more difficult than it seemed. There were 26,000 such white vans across the country. Detectives saw a few special features of the car in the grainy video. It was missing one wheel cover and the left front headlight, and there was a dark rectangular mark on the roof, presumably from a removed orange flashing beacon. There was also an unusual stain on the side that looked like a fuel leak. A large-scale operation began, a request to the traffic police for all registered white Fords, a check of hundreds of car parks. The police literally went out onto the roads, stood guard at the highways, personally writing down the license plates of all suspicious white vans that drove by. And nothing, no results. The case reached a dead end. And what do the police do in such cases? And they are already appealing to the public. A white van with damage is being sought. It may be involved in a murder. The hood, headlights and traces of a beacon are missing. After this appeal for help in finding the car, a woman called the police. She suspects her ex-boyfriend. They say this guy is definitely capable of this. His car fits the signs. She noticed that he works as a wheel clamper. He's this guy who blocks the wheel on incorrectly parked cars. And he happens to be driving a white van. The woman gave his name Levi Bellfield. The funny thing is, this claim is not unique. The police hotline received 129 reports from people who pointed to possible acquaintances with white vans. And several of the women who contacted the police also pointed to Bellfield. The dude is hitting the bases. Bingo, Mr. Bellfield, it turns out, owns a white Ford van. And that's not all. Digging deeper, the police found that Bellfield had other cars in the past that lit up near the scenes of all three attacks. The name alone doesn't tell you anything, because you have to establish whether it was him at all. But knowing the name makes it much easier to find the killer. Detectives immediately located Bellfield's address and found his vehicle, a white Ford Courier van. The car had exactly the same signs as in the camera recording. One hood and headlight were missing, a mark from a removed beacon, and aluminum strips were attached to the back, which in the video looked like dark streams of fuel. Cops set up surveillance on the suspect. For several days, detectives followed 36-year-old Bellfield, recording his daily routine. He behaved as if nothing had happened. He continued his nightly trips in search of victims. During one surveillance, detectives saw Bellfield stop at a bus stop where two schoolgirls, aged 14 and 16, were standing, and he began to vulgarly cling to them, offering them intimacy. At this point, investigators had to intervene. He was detained, but did not give any indication that surveillance had been introduced. It was as if they were just driving by and accidentally saw him clinging to the children. Then he will be released. In parallel with the surveillance, analysts began to carefully check Bellfield's mobile phone. As it turned out, he was quite cunning. Almost every time he went hunting, he turned off his mobile phone so that he could not be tracked by cell tower signals. However, during the murder of Amélie Delagrange, Bellfield made a mistake and forgot to turn off his mobile phone. The operator's data confirmed that at the time of the attack his phone was registered near Twickenham Green. This fact became an important piece of circumstantial evidence because the attacker left no DNA or fingerprints. Here's something else interesting. Analysis of Levi Bellfield's cell phone data showed a suspicious match. His phone went off the hook at the exact same time as the attacks on the other two girls, which, you see, was suspicious. Detectives came to collect physical evidence and new testimonies. It turned out that Bellfield was constantly changing cars. Because of his business, he could change up to 20 cars a year, often re-registering them in his name or not registering them at all. The police tracked down several key vehicles linked to the attacks. After searching the database, investigators found that Bellfield had been driving a silver Volkswagen Corsa registered to his company in 2003. This was the car that was captured on cameras behind the night bus from which Marsha McDonnell got off. In 2004, Bellfield switched to a white Toyota Prius minivan with tinted windows, exactly the same as Kate had described when she came to her senses after the hit and run. The police expanded the scope of the episodes and began investigating unsolved crimes of a similar nature. To begin with, they interviewed Bellfield's former employees and acquaintances. And here's what's interesting. Some of them mentioned his pathological hatred of women, especially blondes. One of his colleagues, although not immediately, nevertheless gave evidence, allegedly seeing how Bellfield attacked a woman, 33-year-old Irma Drogoshi, with a hammer in late 2003. As a result, she received a serious head injury. Another unsolved case, which has now been reviewed, occurred in 2001. 17-year-old Anna Maria Renner reported an unknown man who tried to drag her into a car in the Twickenham area. At that time, the suspect was not found, but now the police have searched for Anna herself who had already left England by that time. She was shown video recordings and photos of Bellfield. The girl recognized him without hesitation. On the morning of November 22, 2004, a special unit stormed the suspect's home in West Drayton, where he was caught off guard and arrested. Bellfield was taken into custody on suspicion of murdering Amélie Delagrange and was soon charged with 2 more assaults on Marsha, McDonnell and Kate Sheedy, despite the entire body of circumstantial evidence. After his arrest, Bellfield behaved defiantly and quite self-confidently in the detention centre. During interrogations, he demonstratively played indifference. During one of the interviews, he turned his chair to face the wall, showing his back to the investigators that he was not going to listen to their questions. And sometimes, on the contrary, he turned on the company's soul mode. Detective Seton recalls that when he first encountered Bellfield, he behaved as friendly as possible.
He is cunning and very cruel. He can switch from pleasant to fiercely aggressive in an instant.
As you understand, he was not going to confess, so the investigation actually turned into a psychological duel. And it's a very interesting story. Bellfield had the police fooled into turning away from them, so they bolted the chair to the floor so that Bellfield couldn't turn away. And all the photos and documents were printed with information on both sides of the sheet of paper. When the suspect pathetically and indifferently turned the paper over, the same pictures of the victims and maps of the crime scenes appeared before his eyes again. Despite the fact that Levi Bellfield was not going to confess and did not make contact, playing the silent game, the detectives managed to collect enough circumstantial evidence to confidently bring charges. Before we move on to the trial and the verdict, let's get to know this character better and analyze his psychological portrait. There is a lot of interesting and truly creepy stuff there. In particular, let's analyze Bellfield's other murders, for which another person was in prison. Levi Bellfield was born on May 17, 1968, in the West London neighbourhood of Isleworth, in a simple working-class family. When Levi was 10 years old, his father died, so his mother raised 4 children alone in a council house on the outskirts. This is a state house for low-income families. It would seem that nothing special, a typical childhood in a dormitory area. However, problems with the law began early. Bellfield received his first conviction in 1981, but the age of 13 for a burglary. The guy constantly traded in beatings, petty thefts, and traffic violations. He was repeatedly under administrative arrest. Teachers and neighbors remembered him as a brawler and a local hooligan. But that's it. We are interested in something else. The guy had despised women since he was a teenager. Why? There are a few things that could explain it. His father died early. His mother and another woman with 4 children on their shoulders were left at home. She didn't have time for her son. How was school? And love, it seems. She was just surviving. But Levi remembered and grew up with the feeling. Women don't listen. Women don't give you what you want. Plus, he was a guy with an early hormonal explosion, charismatic, marketable, one of those who, at 15, already, as they say, take off a calf. And it began to seem to him that he was the one in charge. As he himself said, and I quote, "I can take off any woman when I want." Well, you get the idea. Bellfield realized early that he had quite a bit of charisma and learned to manipulate girls. He started having sex with women early on and having children. As a result, Bellfield fathered 11 children by 5 different women throughout his adult life. Imagine 3 of his girlfriends getting pregnant by him at the same time. At the same time, he terrorized each of them. In short, he was a complete mess of jealousy for any reason. For example, she looked at someone in a store, a scandal. She didn't answer the phone. Who did you sleep with? She smiled at the bus driver. That's it, you slut. He could check his phones every day, pick up, block the numbers of relatives. I'm not kidding. He forced one of his women to change her phone number and delete all men from her contacts, including her own brother. I think I don't need to explain that he beat his partners. I think you already guessed it. The funny thing is that despite this, he cheated on each of his 3 regular partners with the other 2, and he abused and was jealous of them all. Girls, my advice to you: stay away from such jealous fools. Nothing good will come of it. It is widely believed that serial killers are some kind of reclusive psychopaths who are clearly different from everyone else. Bellfield breaks this stereotype. He masterfully disguised himself as his boyfriend. Sociable, smiling, he knew how to charm from the first meeting. He could seem a little rude, but definitely not a monster. Outside of his personal life, he made a positive impression on his acquaintances, neighbors, etc. None of them simply knew that Bellfield had pathological misogyny, hatred of women, especially young blondes. Try to explain. This hatred manifests itself in perverted fetishes. Former girls said that Levi asked them to wear school uniforms, and he liked to drive past schools and cling to schoolgirls, shouting obscenities. Once his friend found a magazine where Bellfield cut out the faces of all the blonde models with a knife, and this is already a sick obsession, and women who dyed themselves blonde he considered whores, unclean, and those who deserve to be tortured. This is not gossip. Similar statements are recorded in the case materials, as The Guardian writes about. This hatred of blondes is also confirmed by what his victims were like. See for yourself. This fucker's ego was inflated to the skies. He genuinely thought he was macho and handsome, a gift to all women. Detective Seton tried to explain this twisted logic. He has a gigantic ego. He thinks he's a godsend for everyone. He's driving around. He sees a young blonde. She says to him, "Get off me." And he thinks, "How dare you screw Levi Bellfield? You're nothing." And she gets hit in the head. If a girl refused him or simply did not respond to his foolish advances, Bellfield would explode in rage. As the prosecutor told the court, he would prowl around bus routes in search of young victims, lure them with promises of beatings, parties and sex, and if he was felt, he would go into a frenzy and attack. This trait is traced in all his attacks. In fact, Bellfield punished girls for daring to refuse him or simply not being friendly enough, as well as simply to let off steam from problems in their personal lives and jealousy in relationships. To summarize, the motive for the murders was general misogyny. Bellfield did not see women as people. He saw weaker ones whom he wanted to possess. If a woman was not his, she was automatically an enemy. Psychologists believe that Bellfield attacked women as revenge for those who did not obey him. Each new victim was like a generalized ex who betrayed, did not obey, left. That is, the murders did not have a meaning, they had a function. He let off steam, felt strong, punished for imaginary insults. Bellfield was tried at Old Bailey Crown Court in late 2007 and early 2008. He was charged with 3 main offences: the murders of Marsha McDonnell and Amélie Delagrange, and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy. The trial lasted over 3 months. All this time, Levi Bellfield bluffed, pleaded not guilty and tried to pretend to be an angel. Kate Sheedy herself testified against him in court. She became the main witness for the prosecution. Kate described in detail that night, the car with blacked out windows and a broken mirror. During questioning in court, she broke down in tears twice, talking about injuries, pain and fear. On the 25th of February 2008, Levi Bellfield was found guilty. The verdict was unanimous on the Amélie Delagrange murder, and unanimous on all counts related to the Kate assassination. In the Marsha murder, the jury also found guilty, 10 votes to 2. The judge announced the maximum possible sentence, life imprisonment without parole, but the story does not end there. There were other victims. By the time of the 2008 trial, the police already suspected that Bellfield might be responsible for more than just those 3 attacks. Immediately after the verdict, it was revealed that detectives in the neighboring county of Surrey were preparing to charge Levi with another, much older murder, a case that had long been widely publicized. It involved the disappearance of 13-year-old Amanda Milly Dowler, a schoolgirl who went missing on her way home from school in March 2002. This happened 6 months before the murder of Marsha McDonnell. At the time, no one could have imagined that these events could be connected. Milly simply disappeared in broad daylight near the train station. The whole city was looking for her. The photos were printed in every newspaper. Unfortunately, after 6 months of searching, only her body was found. Her remains were found in a forest 50 kilometers from home. And what is Bellfield here for? Well, there are a whole series of coincidences that indicate that he was the one who probably killed the girl. At the time of Milly's disappearance, he lived literally 100 meters from the place where she was last seen, in the town of Walton-on-Thames. Moreover, Milly went to primary school with the daughter of one of Bellfield's former friends. That is, she could have known him by sight as her friend's father, and therefore got into his car without any caution that day. Detectives also found that Bellfield was driving a red Dio Nexia at the time, and it was the red Nexia that was caught on camera near the station on the day Milly disappeared. He later sold the car. It has never been found. When Levi was questioned about March 2002, he could not honestly say where he was that day, although he usually made up a carefully crafted alibi. The combination of this evidence allowed him to be charged in 2010 with the kidnapping and murder of Milly Dowler. Bellfield refused to testify at that trial and even tried to pretend he was being pressured. This time, however, his guilt was almost obvious. In June 2011, a jury found Levi Bellfield guilty of murdering 13-year-old Milly. He received another life sentence. In 2016, Levi Bellfield unexpectedly confessed to the murder of Milly Dowler. After that, the cops began to dig even deeper. In their opinion, Milly is far from the first victim. In total, he's associated with at least 20 attacks on women, including cases of rape and beatings. However, there is no evidence of this. In 2016, Levi Bellfield unexpectedly confessed to the murder of Milly Dowler. After that, the cops began to dig even deeper. In their opinion, Milly is far from the first victim. In total, he's associated with at least 20 attacks on women, including cases of rape and beatings. However, there is no evidence of this. Nevertheless, he is officially suspected of the double murder of the Russell family in 1996. Then, on a country path, an unknown person attacked a woman with 2 daughters with a hammer. 45-year-old Lynn Russell and her 6-year-old daughter Megan were killed, and 9-year-old Josie miraculously survived, although she suffered serious head injuries. The funny thing is that another man, local drug addict Michael Stone, who was convicted back in the 90s, is serving a life sentence for this crime. Although there was no direct evidence against him, only circumstantial evidence, Stone has always denied the charges, and so in 2022, the British media exploded. Levi Bellfield made a written confession that he had killed Lynn and Megan Russell. He handed over his detailed confession letter to Stone's lawyer. He described what he was wearing. He mentioned the yellow kitchen gloves, what kind of hammer he had, how he attacked first the mother, and then the children, how he even killed the family dog. He named the details that were not in the press, which only the killer could know. He wrote that he was driving in that area that day and happened to see 3 women on the road. He stopped, tied them up and killed them. He called the motive, and I quote, pent-up aggression. In this way, he let off steam. In that letter, Bellfield writes that this is, I quote, the only case where an innocent person has been imprisoned for my crime. He even apologizes to the Russell family and Michael Stone for his vile actions. At the time of this video, the Russells' official case is being reviewed again, but Bellfield has not yet been charged. That is, he is, de jure, not guilty of that episode. He is now 57 years old. he's still rotting behind bars in a category of prison. This is the highest level of severity for especially dangerous people. He announced that he had converted to Islam and changed his name to Yusuf Rahim.